At the beginning of 2021, I set two main goals for my podcast. One was to reach over 10,000 downloads per month, and the second was to get my first ever brand deal on the podcast. And as of when I'm filming this at the beginning of November, I have been able to achieve both. Woohoo! I grew my show from just over 2,000 or so downloads per month at the beginning of the year to now more than 12,000 downloads every month. And I've started booking almost weekly sponsors for the show. And in this video, I wanted to share with you how I did that so that you can grow your podcast as well. If you're just getting started on your podcasting journey, then I would highly recommend that you check out my 4-part series all about podcasting for beginners. I'll link it up here so you can check it out. This is seriously in-depth, everything that you need to know, from what microphones to use, what editing software I recommend, how to record so it sounds really high quality, and how to create an RSS feed and publish it to all the major platforms. So if you're just getting started, that is definitely the series for you. But if you have gotten your show started, or maybe you're still in the planning phase and you're really thinking about how you're going to grow it so that you can gain a community and maybe eventually even monetize it, then this is the video for you. So in case you didn't know, in addition to my YouTube channel, I am the host of the Creator Club podcast, which is tips and advice all about social media marketing and content creation. A few of my popular episodes include how to grow from zero, the first 5 things I would do with a brand new Instagram account. This is the Instagram strategy that grew my account by 1,000 plus followers in under a month. And this content planning strategy will change your Instagram life. Seriously. So if any of those sound interesting to you, make sure you go subscribe. Hopefully that gives you a sense of where I'm coming from and my background with growing a podcast. So with that, let's get into the top 3 things that I think really helped me to grow my show to where it is now. It's so cliche, but the first and probably most important thing is consistency. I started my podcast in late 2019. And I was pretty consistent for like the first 3 months or so, but then throughout 2020, my whole life blew up with my business really growing and lots of different stuff going on, obviously. And so I kind of got a little bit patchy with how often I was uploading my podcasts throughout 2020. And so after about a year of having a podcast and kind of uploading in short spurts, I'd do a month every single week, and then I'd go 2 months without posting. So after that kind of inconsistency, I had gotten to probably about 1,500 downloads per month. And I think a lot of that was me talking about it on Instagram or on my YouTube channel and sending people to it that way. But this year in 2021, I have been really committed to publishing a new podcast episode every week. I posted weekly all throughout 2021 with the exception of a few weeks in April and May, because honestly I was struggling with some mental health stuff at the time, and so just wasn't in my capacity to make it happen. But otherwise, I've been super consistent all this year, and I think that is the number one reason why I've seen my downloads increase so much. And the reason I bring that up about me not posting in April and May is because I want to normalize, sometimes you don't feel up to being consistent. And I know in a lot of these social media tips videos that I make, I'm always talking about the importance of consistency and posting frequently wherever it is you're trying to grow. But I also want to honor the fact that sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes you're just feeling down and you can't get to that point where you're posting all the time. So if that's where you are, just know that's valid and it's okay. We all go through it. But obviously, if we want to see growth, especially the amount that I saw this past year, then consistency is going to be really important. But don't beat yourself up over it. Just as one final point about consistency, it's important to remember when we're talking about having a certain number of monthly downloads, that is going to be directly correlated to how often you post. So pretty much every episode that I post each week gets around, let's say 2,500 or whatever downloads. And then if you're posting 4 times a month, then that is going to end up being around 10,000 downloads per month. So you can see how right now with my current number of podcast subscribers, if I would just double the number of episodes that I make in a month, I would probably just about double my monthly downloads. So you can see how being consistent actually does directly correlate to your monthly download stat. And then obviously in a less direct way, it's important for growing that audience and increasing your per episode downloads and your number of subscribers. It's also important to note if you're new to the podcasting stats game, and I know it can be kind of confusing sometimes because it's less intuitive, I would say, than a lot of other social media platform stats. Your downloads is different than your plays, and for the most part, your downloads correlate to how many subscribers you have, because at least on Apple Podcasts, if someone is subscribed to your show, it will automatically download each new episode onto their device. So that will count as a download whether or not they actually listen to it. So plays is the stat that really indicates how many people listen to it each week. And just by nature, it's going to be a little bit less. So let's say I have like 2,500 downloads per episode. I might have anywhere from like 1,500 to 2,000 plays, because there's just always going to be some people that don't listen to every single show. That being said, normally when you're like pitching for brand deals and stuff, you will share your download stat and probably your plays as well. So it's all important to keep note of. Okay, so that is consistency. We know how important that is. The next thing that I think really contributed to my growth is consistently asking for reviews. Every week on the Creator Club podcast, I make a point of, after my little teaser and my intro, before I get into the content of the episode, I'll always thank a reviewer. So I'll pick one of my recent reviews from the Apple Podcast app and I'll read it on the show, and I will thank the person who wrote it. And specifically, I will ask people to leave their Instagram handle in the review so I can give them a shout out for their Instagram. And I think that's a really nice way to thank your audience for leaving reviews, by giving them a little bit of a shout out. And it makes particular sense in my case because the people who listen to the Creator Club podcast are content creators. So they really appreciate getting a shout out and maybe getting some more exposure to their page. That's not the only way that you can incentivize people to do it though. I honestly think just thanking them and giving them a shout out and an acknowledgement that you read their review is really, really nice. And most importantly, it keeps it front of mind for the rest of the audience that they can leave a review too. I think the thing about the podcast app is it's not like other social media platforms where you can like and comment and share really easily. It's mostly kind of a one-way experience where you just hit play and then you listen to it and you move on to the next one. So if you want people to leave you a review, you have to be a little bit annoying about it. You need to really remind them a lot, because it's not just as easy as like leaving a comment or a like. You have to like go to the podcast page, scroll down, find that review section, and actually type it out. So in order to get ratings and reviews, you're going to need to talk about it a lot on your show. But the whole point of this is, the reason why ratings and reviews are so important is that your ranking in the Apple Podcast charts is really related to a lot of different factors, and Apple doesn't release their exact formula for how they calculate the rankings, but we know for sure that it is connected to your downloads and also your ratings and reviews. And I can tell this because in my own experience, not only have I read that that is the case, like other people agree on that, but in my own experience, I have noticed that my show will climb the charts, because naturally they kind of like go up and down, especially if you're in the range that I'm in. It will always, bump up a few spots when I get a whole new batch of reviews. So I know that like engagement with the reviews and ratings, as well as the number of downloads you're getting, is what contributes to you being higher on the charts. And being higher on the Apple Podcast charts means more potential listeners, because you are going to show up in search higher, and people might also just be browsing like the top 10 marketing podcasts or whatever, and then they might come across the Creator Club podcast. So if you can, it's good to remind your audience to leave those ratings and reviews, because it adds to pretty much your score in the Apple Podcast charts, which can help you get more listeners. So really it ends up being a bit of like a feedback loop with the charts. Like the more listeners you have, the more reviews you'll likely get, which puts you higher on the charts, which gets you more listeners, and so on. So if you can kind of start that cycle going, it's really going to help you grow. Something that I would recommend trying out, which I have worked with clients before who've done this, and I think that I'm going to try it myself on the Creator Club podcast, is running a bit of a review giveaway. So kind of saying, my typical thanks for reviewing or whatever, but then also saying, for the month of November, anyone who leaves a review on the Creator Club podcast will be entered to win, I don't know what, maybe an Instagram audit or one of the services that my business provides, or something like that. I mean, you could even do a Starbucks gift card, or if your audience is YouTubers, a new camera or whatever. Obviously make it something that your listeners would be interested in. And then it's kind of a nice way to thank the people that leave a review. And it's a good way to kind of push more reviews in a short time because there's a particular time incentive to do it in. So I'll try that out, and maybe I'll make a video in the future letting you know how it goes. But I know for sure having those ratings and reviews is super helpful at increasing your spot in the Apple charts and getting you more listeners. The third thing that contributed to the Creator Club podcast growing so much this past year is that I have been really using SEO to my advantage. When you think about how people discover a new podcast, there are really three main ways. One, surprisingly big one, is word of mouth. So literally your friend just telling you, hey, check out this podcast. I think it's really interesting. That you can control by just having a really good podcast that people want to recommend. The second way people find out about a new podcast is through browsing the Apple Podcast charts or the Explore page, where things are grouped by category or editor's picks or whatever. And the way that you can use that to your advantage is kind of what we were talking about before: increase your ratings, reviews, and downloads so you can show up in the charts. And the third way that people find you is through searching for the content that your podcast is talking about. And the way that you can control that is through really effective SEO. In case you've never heard of it before, SEO just stands for search engine optimization, and it basically just refers to the practice of using accurate keywords and descriptions to allow your content to appear in search. The absolute basics of podcast SEO is starting with a really effective title that describes what your show is about and maybe includes a couple keywords that people could be searching for to find your type of content. So let's use Creator Club as an example. I think one of the kind of best practices of podcast SEO is also having a title that's easy to spell and easy to remember. So when it comes to naming your podcast, it might be an opportunity to use existing words or something a little bit more straightforward rather than making up a whole new made up word or something like that. Because if people do learn about your show through word of mouth and they try to search for it, it's better if they know what to type to find it. But in addition to that, I think a really great hack for podcast SEO is kind of adding a tagline or a subtitle onto your main title that includes keywords. So for example, my podcast is not just called Creator Club, it's called Creator Club Social Media Marketing and Content Creation. And in fact, if you search either social media marketing or content creation, my show is in the top results. So that's a really great way for new people to find me, is by looking through those topics, and then, my little cover art shows up when they search that. So that's the first step, right? Is coming up with a good title that is easily searchable and maybe has a couple taglines on there that people might be searching for to find you. But the next piece is to make sure that your episodes are search engine optimized. So including titles that have really good keywords and writing good show notes that include keywords. So for example, let's look at a couple of my top episodes to kind of explain what I mean here. So like I said before, one of my most popular episodes is how to grow from zero, the first 5 things I would do to grow a brand new Instagram. So from this, you can see we've included some good keywords like grow a brand new Instagram, or just grow and Instagram are both in there. And also with this title, we're not only just keyword stuffing or trying to throw in good searchable words, we're also targeting the human reader by writing an enticing and interesting phrase. So especially how to grow from zero is really eye-catching because a lot of people are in that situation, and it's just really clear what the tangible takeaways are going to be from that. Another example is this Instagram strategy grew my account by 1,000+ in 1 month. Here's how to do it yourself. So this title includes some really great keywords such as Instagram strategy and do it yourself. But again, it is written for a human reader, not just for an algorithm. And it's enticing, it's snappy, it includes a big number that's really eye-catching. So those are the things that you want to balance when you're writing your podcast titles, is think about how you can put in some good keywords that are going to help your episodes show up in search, but also that are going to make them interesting headlines that people want to press play on. Okay, I know I said that I had 3 tips, but I've actually got a bonus tip for you. And this one is a little bit less tangible, but honestly, probably the most important. And that is just have a really good podcast. What I mean by that is it's important that you provide value, whether that's education, encouragement, or entertainment, in every single episode. Really, when it comes down to it, with all these tips, you can do everything in your power to optimize your titles with really great SEO. You can ask for reviews, you can post consistently, but if your podcast just isn't that interesting, it's not going to grow. And I know this is an annoying tip to hear because it's so elusive and it's like, okay, well, how do you create a good podcast? But I think this really just comes down to having empathy for your potential listener and understanding what they're looking for, what their takeaway is going to be, rather than coming into the process thinking about what you want to share. You think about what they want to hear. And finally, just being brutally honest with yourself and asking, like, is this actually interesting? You know, would I listen to this if I didn't know who I was? That's kind of how you need to evaluate it. I really feel like my Creator Club podcast has been successful because I leaned into something that I knew was already working. I knew from my experience on YouTube that people like to listen to my social media marketing and content creation tips that were kind of different from other people because they weren't super flashy or hacky, but rather just really honest and like tangible, clear tips that you can try, and encouragement. I think it worked well on YouTube and it translated well to an audio only experience as well. Let's just be honest, it is really easy to host a mediocre interview show. It's a lot harder to create a podcast that is actually going to be interesting to strangers. So I think that if you're serious about growing, you just need to be honest with yourself, evaluate your premise, make sure that there's a market for it, that people are interested in what you have to say, and that you're doing it in a way that is respectful of their time and actually interesting. And that is really the key to starting to grow. So if you've gotten this far, that means you must be thinking about starting a podcast. So let me know in the comments what kind of show you're thinking about hosting. Are you going to do interviews? Are you going to do a solo show? Let me know. And also let me know if you have any other questions that I can answer about like podcast growth or production or any of that. And of course, go subscribe to the Creator Club podcast if you haven't already, because it's the same kind of tips and advice I share on this channel, only you can listen to it while you're driving to work. As always, I hope that you are having adventures and following your dreams, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!